Good afternoon, everyone from Singapore, and hello to our friends tuning in from Israel as well, also as around the globe. Welcome to today's session on National Cybersecurity Partnership, Singapore and Israel. My name is Wei Min, and for those who may know, SGInnovate is a government-backed deep tech investor and company builder whose mission is to help entrepreneurial scientists build deep tech startups that are looking to solve big global problems. Our work also involves building a global community of scientists thinkers, leaders, and doers to drive and build deep tech innovations in areas such as AI, healthcare, quantum tech, and autonomous technology across various industries. In today's event, we are glad to have partnered with Economic and Trade Mission Embassy of Israel, Singapore, to bring you this webinar on cybersecurity. In the age of digitalization, we are constantly facing issue of cyber threats. I am sure most of us here have already received mails or SMS that are phishing attempts in getting our personal data and information. However, those are just the tip of the iceberg for the issue of cybersecurity. And today, we will learn more on how Singapore has been ramping up such efforts. And it is true, partnerships in the region, such as with Israel, can we take on these threats that does not limit itself to national borders. We will also better understand how similar Singapore and Israel actually is. How can we better learn from each other to ensure that there's a safe cyberspace for all to use? We encourage for all attendees to share with us your thoughts on the topic or interact with our speakers by posting your questions in the Q&A tab located at the bottom panel of your screen. Otherwise, feel free to just say hi and do a quick shout out from where you are in the chat box below. With no further ado, do allow me to start the session with presentation on the cyber landscape in Singapore and collaborative efforts in the region by Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, in short CSA. Our speaker, Mr. Situraj Ponraj, is the Director of the International Cyber Policy Office at the CSA. In his role, he drives CSA's bilateral, regional, and international engagements through initiatives such as the ASEAN Cyber Capacity Program and Singapore International Cyber Week. Although he is not able to join us in person today, we are thankful that Mr. Situraj has done a recording for us for this session, and do allow me to share my screen for his presentation.
Distinguished speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you to SGInnovate and the Israel Trade and Economic Mission for organizing this webinar and inviting the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore to speak on this timely and important topic. Alongside our esteemed counterpart, Mr. Oren Bushmitz from the Israel National Cyber Directorate, I'm pleased to share some thoughts on the importance of partnership in national cybersecurity with fellow members of the cyber and tech community. Many countries, particularly Singapore and Israel, have greatly benefited from digitalization. Digitalization allows us to harness the power of technology to grow our businesses, drive our economies, and redefine our competitiveness and relevance to the world. The importance of digitalization was even more prominent when the pandemic hit last year. Digitalization allowed work, life, and play to continue as social distancing measures and lockdowns kicked in across the world. COVID-19 accelerated the pace of digitalization, with businesses intensifying the adoption of digital tools for business continuity. Individuals relied on digital activities to continue work and social interaction. All this would not be possible without a safe, secure, and stable cyberspace. As we go digital, we are also exposing ourselves to increased risks and vulnerabilities online. A robust cybersecurity environment is all the more crucial for trusted and secure use of technology. The rapid implementation of remote working and e-learning has significantly changed the nature of cyber threats that we need to address today. CSA received 89 reports of ransomware in 2020, a 154% increase in cases from 2019. Notably, local ransomware cases increased from April 2020 onwards, coinciding with the circuit breaker and post-circuit breaker periods in Singapore. It is possible that the observed increase was due to the larger attack surface stemming from hastily implemented IT infrastructure to support telecommuting and poor cyber hygiene practices of telecommuting employees. Our research further revealed that phishing attempts were most active in the period between March to May 2020, with some 1,500 malicious URLs observed. This was more than double the number from the preceding quarter. The increase was likely due to cybercriminals attempting to spoof entities and services such as online retail and payment portals that were in greater use during Singapore's lockdown period. As we tap on the economic opportunities brought about by digitalization, we must also double down on our efforts to deal with its risks. Just as in the physical space where we would lock the doors to our house to protect our family and belongings, we similarly cannot leave the doors to our digital house open and let malicious cyber actors take whatever they wish. There are real economic costs attached to attacks on our digital systems. In IBM Security's 2020 Cost of a Data Breach report, the average global cost of a data breach in 2020 was estimated to be $3.8 million US. In the Middle East, this average cost was estimated at $6.5 million US, the region with the second highest cost among the 17 regions surveyed. In ASEAN, the average cost of a data breach in 2020 was estimated to be $2.7 million US. More importantly, cybersecurity secures the trust needed for our digital-dependent way of life. Businesses need to know that they can operate in a secure environment. Citizens need to know that the public services supporting their continued safety, health, and welfare remain accessible. There is a real risk that trust in the digital economy is eroding, with examples of major data breaches and consumer information mismanagement reducing consumers' willingness to engage with online services. Trust between nations to behave responsibly in cyberspace has also taken a hit, exacerbated by events like the recent SolarWinds breach, a highly sophisticated supply chain attack. Ensuring a resilient and secure cyberspace cannot be achieved in silo. Collaboration across countries and stakeholders will be crucial to our success. At the international level, Singapore is fully committed to the development of a rules-based multilateral order in cyberspace and has been an active and constructive player in international cyber policy discussions at the United Nations. A rules-based cyberspace will foster trust and confidence and serve as a key enabler of the digital economy. It is also important to translate these internationally recognized rules, norms, and principles for regional blocs to implement. Regional initiatives help ASEAN member states build readiness to respond to potential cyber crises and support our digital economies. In 2018, ASEAN leaders issued the first ever ASEAN Leaders Statement on Cybersecurity Cooperation at the 32nd ASEAN Summit. The statement called for greater ASEAN coordination on cyber policy, norms, confidence building measures, and capacity building. Last year, ASEAN ICT and cyber ministers further committed to the norms of responsible state behavior in cyberspace by agreeing to develop a long-term regional cybersecurity action plan to chart an implementation roadmap for ASEAN member states. At the national level, Singapore recognizes that tapping on the expertise of relevant stakeholders is crucial to address increasingly sophisticated threat actors in the rapidly evolving digital domain. In particular, the private sector and academia can contribute technical solutions and resources for a more resilient and robust cyberspace. With academia and researchers, Singapore established the National Cybersecurity R&D Program, or NCR, in 2013 and has invested more than 190 million Singapore dollars in cybersecurity research. In 2019, an additional tranche of 300 million Singapore dollars was committed to digital technology research, of which cybersecurity is a critical area. Under the NCR program, we work closely with Israeli Institutes of Higher Learning. 2 joint grant calls were launched in 2016 and 2021 with Israel's Tel Aviv University. This year's joint grant call covers research collaboration areas such as security of smart cities and Internet of Things, behavioral studies and social science of cybersecurity, and policy and governance of cybersecurity. We also need to translate such research into solutions. To support this, we introduced a Cybersecurity Co-Innovation and Development Proof of Concept Funding Scheme to catalyze the development of innovative cyber solutions. Since 2018, 2 calls for innovation have also been organized for innovation of cybersecurity solutions that are not yet commercially available. Digitalization is here to stay, and digital technologies can be a force for deep and lasting good. We all have a role to play in working together as a team to continue to develop and refine cybersecurity solutions. We welcome partnership from our colleagues in Israel and the larger cyber and tech community to help develop the ideas and relationships needed to face the cyber challenges of today and those ahead of us. I wish everyone a productive session ahead. Thank you. Distinguished speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Situraj, for providing us a background and understanding to Singapore's cybersecurity efforts in the region. Following which, do allow me to also introduce Mr. Oren Bushmitz, CTO, Israel National Cyber Directorate, for his presentation on emerging trends on a global basis, cyber landscape in post-COVID. May I invite Oren to take the stage, please?
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. My name is Oren. I work for INCD, which is the Israeli National Cyber Directorate. It's a kind of a similar organization to the CSA. The INCD role is twofold. One, the primary goal is to maintain cyber stance in Israel, meaning protect the state of Israel, the civilian part, with respect to cyber. And the second role is to promote the Israeli cyber industry. I thought about introducing, instead of focusing on one specific area, I thought about introducing several fields of interest. Many of them were in interest before COVID, but for sure, a lot of them got a big boost in the time of COVID. So I've prepared a presentation to help me do this. I will share my screen. It's okay. Excellent. So I'm going to talk about a couple of topics. Intentionally, I'm not going to go too deep into each one of them. The goal here is not to go low, but to show a lot of areas that I think interconnect amongst themselves. So first topic is AI. AI for sure, we all heard about it. It's very interesting. It was highly used in the time of COVID. A lot of models, a lot of attempts. Interestingly so, it was combined with the need to share information between a lot of health institute, governments, and it brought up to the surface a lot of interesting problems. So when we talk about AI, first question we ask ourselves is, what's cyber for us? So there is a lot of talk about ethical AI. What's ethical to do in the realm of AI, and we think it's not cyber questions for us. So we try to focus more on the impact on technology and processes, meaning how do we keep AI robust and safe? How do we make it work? How do we know that it's working okay? Moving from the regular secure development that we are familiar today with to the next generation development of topics, which in some areas we're not really sure how they work. So we try to separate them. There are areas which are not super clear. For example, the use of deep fake for social inference is something we don't use. But when we look about implementation of biometrics, for instance, it's very important to be able to identify if someone is indeed a person or it's a fake. So this is the first questions we thought about. I'm giving just a few traction points of where we stand with AI. As I said before, we're doing some targeted research with academia and industry. For sure, these are topics, advanced technologies are topics which academy and industry are a very good partner for us, since they are much ahead of the government in a lot of respect. We're also utilizing, as a government, our international cooperation to promote research, promote cooperation, share information and insights. And the goal, of course, would be eventually to create, as a regulator, to create some kind of policies, recommendation, best practices. So when we talk about AI, we're talking about several categories that we have looked about. First category was using AI for defense, which was the easiest and natural choice. We tried, looking at the landscape of companies that we see ahead, and pretty soon we understood that we don't need to do anything here. The industry is pretty much ahead of us. and AI is everywhere. So what can we do as a government? Sometimes we can provide specific data. For instance, a lot of critical infrastructure has information which is not publicly open. So sometimes we can share it in order to make, build better models, create a data which is could be used for learning, things like that. We as a government, I think we can use central services. So if we come up with a good model for, I don't know, for code sanitation, we can create a central model that we deploy to the government. So first topic, AI for defense, we think it's going to be handled by the industry. Second topic, which is of interest to us, is how to defend against an AI attacker. Which is problematic since it creates a lot of variance in a lot of areas. With respect, for instance, to two issues like time. It's when you deploy a smart attacker, it takes you a shorter time between the discovery of vulnerability to attack. There is a great variance in types of attacks when you use a smart attacker. The quantity is going to be increased since it's not done by a human. We think that the quality is going to change. We are going to see a lot of more of sophisticated attacks. And we look at some of the, what we call the good old technologies, like CAPTCHA and IVRs and things like that. They're going to be heavily stressed in this. So for now, I think we see more of a usage of a mashup of technologies and less of a smart attack, what we call, meaning we see a lot of usage for, an NLP-based text translation, which is getting a lot better. We haven't seen, I think, we haven't seen yet what we call a real smart attack, and hopefully it's going to take us time, but we need to prepare. So what can we do as a government? We can promote this. We can keep it in the focus. We can add resources, meaning add money, create incentive programs, try to attract cooperation with academy and industry in order to make this in the focused area. Third thing that we're observing is defending in AI systems. As I said before, since the use of AI is increasing, we also need to make sure then that AI is protected in some manner. There's a lot of variance here as well. There are attacks that happen during training and during runtime, attacks that are white box and black box, meaning that the assailant knows what to do and not to do. Attacks that are designed to create the backdoor, and attacks that are designed to break your IP and take your data. Whatever the cause or the goal here is, the intention is the same. We need to create some kind of protection here for this, and we need to work on this. It's a very interesting topic because in some cases we don't even know how the system works. In some models they work, but we're not sure how they work. So it's a nice question to think about. How can you trust a system if you're not really sure how it works? If you can't really debug it and you don't understand if it was attacked. How do you create a secured development model for something which has no code and has no rule-based engine, and what's the equivalent of source code or whatever? Again, what can we do? Again, we can keep it in focus. That's one of the, I think it's one of the most interesting topics that I've heard as a government-to-government discussion, but it's not yet a really managed field within industry. Mostly, I think, because it's not yet a proven business model. So we can help this by, again, by promoting this, allowing for resources, money, institutes, combine, create joint task forces for work, create the appropriate research. And we can also try and break the problem into smaller parts. Instead of trying to understand where the system was attacked, maybe you can try first to understand if it's working okay. So here we need to do some homework for this. Last field that we're talking about is the smart automation. Smart automation is an interesting field. It's not necessarily separate. I just separated because personally I like the automation field. I think it's important for us in a lot of respect. I focused on two main areas. One is what we call the boutique tasks, meaning how can we automate a lot of the heavy lifting that is done by a specific, very well-trained personnel, such as reversers or ransomware, IR intervention teams. These are highly costly resources, and they are scarce. We don't have many of these, and it's very hard to train them. So if we could automate some of these procedures, it could help us. The second type of automated task that we're trying to do is what we call smart orchestration, meaning, for example, how can we do faster patching to decrease the time between vulnerability to penetration? How can you create a system that can switch itself from one state to the other based on attack? Maybe steal itself, maybe disconnect itself from the internet when something happens. A lot of time is spent here on the process of trying to understand what's happened. So basically, the field is trying to replace a human or add a helping hand to the human job for boutique from one side, and do like a machine verification for processor from the other side. Again, what can we do here? It's something that if we want to work on this, we can promote this. We're doing some work in this and on those fields as a government. We have an R&D program specialized for cyber, and some of the researches we do with academia and the industry is focused on these domains. So smart automation is the end, basically. Okay, so this was the first topic. Second topic we wanted to talk about is what we call the decentralized digital identity. As we all know, COVID was forcing us to fast track all the digital services. All the things that we as Israel and I think Singapore is the same, initially thought about, we're a small state, everything is closed, you can go. The digital is not super critical. But when COVID came, we saw that it's not the situation, and we need to provide some kind of fast digital way to people to do their business. And I think being able to create a digital identity is a crucial part. Apparently, it's a very complicated question. How do you create a digital identity? And from the other end, it's a very challenging domain, because a lot of the issues on cyber today are related to identity theft or credential theft, which makes it a de facto growing market. So it's a kind of economy today. And it's a circular economy. So what we see today is that people are designing breaches to steal identities, and they're using the identities to create more breaches. That's the way it works. So basically, what we're trying to do is to create a replacement for what we call the paper model. The paper model is the classic model that when you have a wallet in your pocket, you have a lot of documents, IDs and such. And these documents are valid. You were given by an authority, but you can decide who you want to show them or who you want to share them with. And we are looking right now into a decentralized model where basically we have a digital twin, a digital identity, which is representing the real identity. It's gonna reside in your wallet being your mobile phone. I apologize, it's in Hebrew, but it's a mock-up, so I'm using it as a leading show and tell. So you would have your wallet in your mobile phone, you would have your digital ID, you would have your bank account, you would have a medical permit saying that you were vaccinated against COVID, you would have a municipal ID. This is going to be sitting in your wallet, and you are going to be able to share it wherever you want. If you want to share it with a company, you can share it directly with them. The idea is to create a decentralized system, meaning from one end we have the user that has its wallet, and from the other side the other services that the user wants to share the information with. Why we want to go there? For a lot of good cyber reasons. Why? It's going to allow you to identify yourself without the username and password, which is, we think, a huge advantage. Second, it's going to create a situation where there is no de facto central identity repository. In usage, I mean, while we use this, we're going to have a central identity repository to create the identities, but once you create your identity, there is no more need for this. So de facto, there is no central repository to attack. Everything is decentralized. It's going to lower the connectivity between organizations, because the connection and the information transfer between the person to the organization is going to be through the person. So we're going to cut down the interconnection between government organization, and any one of you who worked in IT knows it's a headache. To connect two IT systems, it's not easy. It's gonna give us a trusted ledger of transaction, meaning instead of photocopying and scanning documents, and a lot of organizations keeping the same documents again and again and again. And we've had a lot of cases lately where in a breach, these documents got stolen. So instead of this, we're gonna have a digital equivalent for this, which is safer. This is like how the ecosystem works. You have a ledger meaning perhaps blockchain based. This is going to be the underlying technology, and there is a wallet from the other side, which is the other end of the decentralized solution, and all the regular parts that some of you know, the IDP, the identity providers, and integrators providing the identity-based services. Now, I'm talking about identity, but of course, it's usable for any kind of credential, driving license, academy degree, or whatever you want. It's going to fit in the same wallet. Next topic I wanted to skim through is the world of 5G. So again, that was one of the COVID-related issues. We understood that we need better communication, since everyone all of a sudden tried and started using internet at home. So we think that 5G is going to boost up things here in both respects. One, it's going to give a better connectivity to the list. Of course, it offers a lot of new services. And second, it gives us, I think, a better, a more secured environment to work. So naturally, we're pushing this domain. One of the interesting topics that we wanted to go there is to see that how can we create a cyber-secured 5G network. So we created a team that is comprised from a lot of stakeholders here: the Ministry of Communication, the Israeli Innovation Authority, the Army, which is using also a civilian network, and INCD, of course. And basically, what we did is we pinpointed on several topics that we think that a government could assist. Meaning we don't want to replace the role of operators, but and of course, I'm not going to talk about regulation and things that the operators should do, because it's another topic that is addressed. I'm thinking more of technological things that we can introduce. So some of these topics were, as we all know, 5G is based on private cloud technology. So we can use some of the specific development we did for a public cloud protection and deploy it there. We can create some specific research in specific domains like slicing, network slicing, which is kind of a network as a service feature that the 5G brings, which is, we think it's a very interesting solution, but it's also introduces some interesting cyber dilemmas. We can use the world of alternative monitoring, meaning that on first stage, we think that a lot of the heavy lifting is going to be done by the vendors, meaning the operators are going to be very dependent on vendors. And we would like to create, if possible, a solution or a situation where we can look at this black box model and say, okay, we know it's a black box, something goes on inside. We need to create some kind of a way to make sure it's working okay. So we were thinking about taking additional information from a carrier and try to combine it with cyber information to make sure everything works okay, and so forth. These are some of the aspects we wanted to observe. We wanted to take some sectors, specific sectors like health, for instance, and create a kind of a blueprint, meaning how would a 5G enabled health sector would look like, and how can we make it more secured. The challenge here, of course, you have to remember, is not to create a secured solution, but to create a business enabling solution which is also secured. So that's the goal in mind here. There is an ongoing team that is doing its work here. I think that's more or less the direction here. Last topic I want to talk about, I'm going to do it fast. It's the issue of data integrity and protection. That's one of the most interesting topics we have. I think the need, we talked about this, it also was very promoted by COVID. There is a need to securely do off-premise processing, meaning today with the public cloud infrastructure, it's very easy to create a powerful computing solution. The only issue is that it's public, it's not yours, so it's basically running on someone else's hardware. And at the same time, we want sometimes to share information. Take, for instance, the COVID. We wanted to share health-related information, which is problematic. It's problematic with respect to privacy, to all kinds of regulation. So the goal is sometimes it's not sharing big data. Sometimes it's sharing, sensitive or confidential data. And we want to share it securely, meaning there are situations where we don't want even to trust the cloud providers. Not because we think that they're bad, but we know that sometimes things happen there as well. They are also attacked on a regular basis. So these are the supporting trends for this. This is why it's coming more and more of reality. So what we basically do, the research we're doing here is we're trying to harness homomorphic encryption and using it to tweak machine learning algorithm. So the machine learning algorithm would be able to run on fully encrypted, fully homomorphic encrypted data, meaning that you can take data, encrypt it at the source, meaning at the hospital, for instance, move it to an unsecure environment like a cloud, run your model there. The model is the same model that you're using on a clear data information with a very slight change. And the game would be to see if you get the same results on the encrypted data that you would get on the same clear text data. Again, without opening the encrypted data at any time, which is quite different from what we do today with respect, to encryption of data at rest and in transit. But eventually, you open up the data. So this is something that we're looking into. There are other types of scenarios relevant to this information where we want, for instance, to be able to maybe take sensitive indicators and try to see if we can find them in the wild without giving away the indicator itself. So this is an interesting area for us. How can we protect data, not only systems, but also data? That's it. That was my issue. It was, I know it was skin deep, but that was the intention to try to show as much information possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Oren, for a wonderful presentation. There were some points brought up, such as the evolution of attacks, defending against AI system. I think we'll come back to that again. As we also have a speaker here who can share more on fighting against such adversaries for cybersecurity. So now we'll just move on to our panel discussion. Joining me along with Oren will be Mr. Guy Segal, Vice President, Cybersecurity Service, APAC at Sydney. May I first invite Guy to first do a quick introduction of himself before we move on to the discussion. Guy, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Guy Siegel. I'm based here in Singapore and managing Signia's delivery and professional engagements in Asia Pacific, and acting as a trusted advisor to many of our clients in the region in Singapore as well. A bit of my personal background: I was the general manager of Custodial Technologies, a local cybersecurity startup in Singapore. Prior to that, I was country leader for IBM Security in Israel, and 24 years within the Israeli Cyber Intelligence Corps. My last role was Deputy Director of the Israeli Defense Forces Cyber Command.
Thank you, Guy. So since we are talking about national cybersecurity, more specifically, let's look deeper into the cybersecurity landscape in Singapore and Israel. Can we perhaps share what are some of the similarities between Singapore and Israel in the cybersecurity space, and what of it that actually make things meaningful for the industry players of these two countries to collaborate? Oren, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I think there are a lot of similarities between Israel and Singapore in a lot of respect. Size, technology, type of institutes, the way government sees cooperation with industry and academy. Actually, we're doing, I think, quite a lot of cooperation with Singapore government, CSA mostly. I think just recently I had a discussion where one of the labs that we're building in Israel is an OT lab, ICS SCADA lab, and Singapore already had one of those. So naturally, we are now working to create some kind of cooperation between us to be able to share knowledge, share insights, maybe share data, and maybe help academy and industry create a place where they can work and cooperate. So I think a lot of these issues are common. Small, highly technological countries like Singapore and Israel would rely heavily on digital technology, and for a lot of issues, communication, AI, and a lot of digitization services, and these services, as we know from COVID, are under heavy attack. So I think a lot of the same rationale here stands, and there is a lot of room to cooperate between.
Right. So that's on the whole forming up of the defensive capabilities and capabilities for against cyber threats and things like that. So in terms of similarities, maybe I'll just pose this additional question to Guy as well. In terms of the similarities, do you see the threats faced by Singapore and Israel? Are there any similarities, or is there any differences that in terms of these threats that we see coming in from the two countries?
Thank you, Renee. Well, there are lots of similarities. First, I think that one thing which is very much in common to Singapore and to Israel is the desire for innovation. Those two nations, which I share love and appreciation to, are very much into leading the world in many aspects. If we see, for example, Singapore in fintech, also lots of efforts being done lately in AI. So if we see lots of progress that was done, by the way, in both nations when it comes to fighting COVID and to using technological, innovative ideas and tools to fight COVID. When I think of that, I see that not only as a major opportunity for both nations, but also as a major risk. Because in old days, in order to threaten the national assets of countries like Israel or Singapore, you needed to have a real border with them, or at least to have some geographical proximity. But now, you can threaten those assets almost from anywhere. And another thing which is very much in common with Singapore and Israel is that as small nations, we are heavily, each of our nations, relying on some, not many, specific, strategic, focal points that we need to ensure the safety and the resiliency of those. And I think that it forces us to put lots of attention and effort to secure cyber-wise those assets. And another issue, which is I think not many are aware of, those two nations have also limitation of resources. We are small nations. Israel is not much larger than Singapore when it comes to human capital. And we need to be very much focused. We're choosing our battles and choosing our efforts. You can't defend it all, so you need to defend it wisely. And that's the main challenge, I think, that traditionally both nations had when it came to traditional kinetic defense. But we also share the same challenge nowadays when it comes to cyber defending our nations. And the last thing which is common is that when it comes to cybersecurity, there is no front and home front. Everybody is in the front. The government, enterprises, and even private users. And it stretches the, I would say, definition of cyber defense, cyber defense, and the ability to defend. And this is a challenge that many countries share, but when it comes to small nations such as Israel and Singapore, I think it is way, way tougher.
Thanks, Guy. So as a consultancy and incident response company, how do you think, or could you just share more of these innovation practices that can be best applied as the response to cybersecurity threats? Or perhaps could you cite some examples of these innovation practices so far?
Thank you. So when we are nowadays dealing with cyber threats and attackers, we see them being more and more sophisticated and innovative than they used to be before. We find ourselves dealing with different methods of attack, and we find ourselves in a need to be creative and innovative when it comes to the ways that we cope with those attacks. We see a major increase not only in the volume of attacks lately, but also in the sophistication of those attacks. What we do in order to deal with that is not only using our own proprietary in-house technologies and tools, but also developing new ones based of open source and based on lots of knowledge that could be found out there within the ecosystem. Even then, we see again and again that the fight from the trenches with the attackers cannot be automated. We need to have the human advantage when it comes to defeating sophisticated attacks. As they do not attack us fully automatic, we cannot defend only with fully automated tools. On the other hand, we see that the increasing amount of cyber attack also raises the demand for incident response experts in the market. And that, I would say, gap in skilled manpower and women power, of course, as well, is getting only tougher. And we expect that one to be tougher as time goes by and to face a real challenge, even more than it's facing to all of us now. The main challenge is that you cannot really train someone to be an instant response expert. This person needs to be one that is breathing cyber, dreaming cyber, feeling cyber, enjoying cyber.
Yep. So I guess the part.
I want to add something.
Yeah, sure, Aaron.
I totally agree with Guy. I think that the same problem is the problem that we see. Training people is hard, and I think that's part of the reason that you cannot rely only on people, because we cannot fill this gap eventually. So we need to offload some of the works. But I'll give you an interesting question that we're dealing with. One of the topics that we're trying to address is the issue of ransomware. And one of the researchers that we're trying to do today is, given that you are introduced into a post-ransomware situation, okay, so the problem already happened. The organization is locked. Now, one of the things that you need to do is to understand how it happened, because if you wouldn't understand how it happened initially, you risk two things. One, they'll come visit you again because they already know that you can be hit. And you're going to be open to other types of attacks. So this is one of the things we're trying to think about automating, not the incident response, but trying to go backwards. So giving a certain situation, can we automate the task of trying to detect the point of origin, the point of entry? This is an example. If we can do it, then it's something that we can use to assist and help human observer to double check itself or doing some work in parallel. But I agree with the guy, the human factor is a win here for both countries.
I want to add something more about the point you just raised, Oren. And I think that also supports collaboration between nations, but also importing knowledge from outside to Singapore in this case. In many cases, we see that the cyber attack against a bank in Mexico is quite similar to a cyber attack against a bank in Asia Pacific or in Israel. In some other cases, it's not similar. But we see that when new methods are adopted, they're usually adopted globally by threat actors that try to run those campaigns as wide as they can in order to make advantage of the assets that they already possess. And the cooperation between nations, between academy, between enterprises and companies, when it comes to cybersecurity and bringing outside knowledge is crucial in order to win the game. Or at least survive, because I don't think we'll ever totally win.
Right, I'm liking this exchange. So I think it was mentioned, if we were to talk about gaps, human talent gaps, and also trying to come up with ways, research, I think we cannot exclude Institute of Higher Learnings. So maybe I'll just bring the question back to Oren. Apart from the research work done with Tel Aviv, as mentioned by Situraj in the video presentation earlier, how do you think we can actually further strengthen collaborative efforts between Israel and Singapore to strengthen cybersecurity capabilities, even on the research end, translating from lab to actual solutions?
It's a very interesting question, and I think it's right on the money. I think one of the ways that, first of all, we're big supporters of academia. We have, I think, 7 cyber institutes and 7 universities in Israel, which are doing their own cyber academic research. And I think most of the R&D projects that we're promoting are industry and academy together. So there's usually front-facing company, which is industry, because industry knows how to build things, and at the back there is usually some kind of researchers with a weird idea. I think, to your question, that one of the ways to cooperate is through national labs. So if we have a national SCADA labs in Singapore, and we have one in Israel, it's the perfect place where industry, government, and academy come together and it's a safe harbor because in Israel, at least, government is not involved in IP. That's not our goal. We don't accumulate knowledge. We want to share it. So we can do a lot of G2G umbrella kind of work where we provide the infrastructure, the space, the scenarios, or the future problems, and we're using academy and industry because these guys are well connected to how things are done and what's working and what's not working in past attempts. So we have today SCADA infrastructure lab. We have smart transportation. We have smart city. I think there are a lot of similarities between Israel and Singapore with respect to these kind of technological domains. I think this is one optional thing that we can use together.
Thank you, Aaron. So I think we're running out of time. We have a couple of questions, but before we just go to the questions, I have one last question to Guy, which is, as Signia opened its APAC office here in Singapore in May 2020 last year, the founder, Chief Executive, Satra Levy, I apologize if I pronounced the name wrongly, commented that setting up our regional headquarters here in Singapore will further strengthen our capability to support our clients across APAC region. Could you further share, is there any strategic aspects of having base in Singapore so as to strengthen the cybersecurity efforts in the region? How does Singapore, the office setting in Singapore actually plays a role?
Well, first I want to emphasize that nowadays you can really manage an incident without being within the client's premises. You can do this remotely. Well, actually, we got this understanding only during the COVID period, but to think of it, it was very reasonable because the adversary is always working from remote. But it took us in the industry time to adopt the understanding that we can do that as remote as well. So we do most of the engagements remotely, by the way, like most of the industry nowadays. Still, being based here in Singapore gives us a major advantage. Singapore is, I would say, the best hub to work in Asia Pacific. With its location, with the, I would say, smooth way of doing business here in Singapore and managing a business here in Singapore. And of course, one thing that I must suggest, we are a company owned by Temasek. We are an Israeli company. Well, actually, it's more complicated. We are a Singapore company, Signia, owned by an Israeli company, Signia, mostly owned by Temasek. So we are a kind of a Singaporean Israeli Merlion, built out of Singaporean owners, Singaporean entity, and Israeli headquarters and mothership in Tel Aviv. We're very proud of that. So first, we're here to serve the local ecosystem in Singapore. But second, I can't think of a more reasonable, makes sense location to spread in Asia Pacific than Singapore. And I think that one thing that we are very proud of, and by the way, another thing in which Israel and Singapore are very similar nowadays, is that Singapore and Israel are probably two of the very few places on earth that you can now go to your office, work as usual, run your business, and do your day-to-day job despite of the COVID outbreak. And when the COVID outbreak will see the restrictions will ease, we will use our Singapore home base with our Israeli and Singaporean team here in Singapore and in other places to spread and to work in the entire region.
Thank you, Guy. So I think for the remaining time, we'd like to address some questions from the ground. I think we have a very interesting question over here by Peter Morrison. Cyber attacks by state actors come perilously close to being classified as acts of war. How do you think rules of engagement will develop? Will they ever include a kinetic response option? Will any one of you want to take that?
Well, first of all, since I'm working for the government, I'm going to be very careful in what I say. INCD is a defensive organization. We don't attack. That's not part of the mandate. So I think the question is not relevant. In Israel, being responsive is someone else's job. I think looking forward, I think that there should be a balance in a fight where most of the attacks are done out of your country bounds. I think some of the rules might eventually have to change in order to create the right deterrent or scale up things a bit. But that's not something where the NCD is looking into.
I will point further that, as I'm not working for any government anymore, according to foreign press, on May 2019, Israel have attacked a cyber unit of Hamas, kinetically attacked the cyber unit of Hamas. That's the first evidence that I know personally of a kinetic attack of a cyber unit conducted by anyone. And the opposite is also, I think, happening nowadays. We have seen some attacks lately that are attributed to Iran and to Israel. For instance, on Israeli water facilities attributed to Iran, and on an Iranian port attributed to Israel, which are, I would say, physical effects conducted by attacks from the cybernetic domain. I wouldn't like to refer to acts of war because there's a very long discussion on that. I'm just saying that governments, superpowers, and non-government organizations are using cyber as a supplementary to their kinetic capabilities for the past 20 years. We see that phenomena growing, and we also see governments that are using cyber attacks in order to achieve financial goals. We saw that very, very common, even here in Asia in the past decade. And we expect that to grow. The main difference between old times and new times is that that puts enterprises, and not only governments, under risk. When governments have limited capability to defend them, to prevent. And I don't have any optimistic message. It's just going to grow.
Right. Thanks, Guy. So maybe I think one last question addressing on the innovation front. Would emerging technologies, such as quantum, change the game for cybersecurity systems in the near future? Do any of you have any comments to that?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Starting from, the cheap response of once quantum, the immediate quantum is being able to break any kind of encryption. So basically, rendering technologies that we use today for securing communication, obsolete. We know today that a lot of nations and organizations are hoarding information, encrypted information, waiting for the quantum step to be able to crack it. And ending up with once you have powers that are quantum based, you can theoretically break into Bitcoin and change finance economies. So yeah, it's going to affect a lot of we're actually doing some work on this domain, but it's mostly today trying to set up the right framework and bringing the right players to the field to try to understand what we need to do. There is no solution. There is a lot of bilateral effort we're doing today to try to create the right framework to be able to start working. So we're at the beginning of this, and yeah, for sure, but it's going to change things.
Right. Thank you, Oren. So I think we have come to the end of our session. Maybe perhaps can I just ask, would Guy and Oren, both of you, just give some parting words to our audience, for something for them to take home towards at the end of this session? Maybe you can start with Guy.
Well, I do think that someone is calling me again and again. I do think that we should try as an ecosystem that includes governments, includes enterprises, includes users and cyber experts, to do whatever we can in order to create for ourselves a safer world. We will never succeed in that, but we can make our life way easier if we do it, and we invest effort in that. And I think that I have the pleasure as an Israeli who's living in Singapore to witness two governments that each of them is trying to do as much as she can, as much as the government can in that field. It's not perfect. It will never be perfect, but it's way better than other places around the globe.
Thank you, Guy. Oren?
Yeah, I totally agree with Guy. I would take this opportunity to try to invite anyone from academy industry in both Singapore or wherever that has innovative thinking, wants to talk to us and try to promote something. Our approach is open-minded, and as I said, government is something that can be used as a central point to try to move things along. We're not doing stuff, we're facilitating, we're an enabler. So I welcome any cooperation between government to government, industry to government, academy, everyone, because I think this is the way to work.
That is great. And that is why SGInnovate comes in, to encourage this level of interactions and collaborations within agencies, and also building the entire ecosystem. So once again, thank you, Oren and Guy. Great answers and sharing. I hope the audience did manage to have a deeper understanding and the significance of such partnerships with countries like Israel in the cybersecurity space. As mentioned by Mr. Situraj from CSA, that digitalization is here to stay, and we all have a role to play and enhance cybersecurity efforts. Given that technology, while it may have its pitfalls, it does serve a greater good to humanity as well. That being said, I would like to represent SGInnovate to thank all the attendees who have stayed with us till now. And once again, I cannot emphasize further, big thank you to Oren and Guy for all the discussion points raised. Thank you to CSA and Economic and Trade Mission Embassy of Israel Singapore as well for making this happen. For the attendees, do keep a lookout for our post-event mail, which will contain a recording of this session. Do reach out to us at events@sginnovate.com if you'd like to connect with any of our speakers or to have a chat with us for collaboration opportunities. Do also to remember, give us your post-event feedback when you exit the webinar or through the post-event mail as well. With that, this is Wei Min signing off from this webinar. Hope that everyone have a great day ahead. Stay safe, stay healthy. Hope to have you again in our next webinar session. Goodbye.
Goodbye and shalom.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.